good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the North Affair podcast, Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Thank you for joining me. The other day, I was talking about um, deeply affordable housing and what is needed. Canada's housing reckoning, the case for 2.1 million deeply affordable homes across Canada. Now, the other day, our mayor uh, of the city joined other mayors of major cities across the province of Ontario, calling on the provincial government to have a state of an emergency on housing and addiction. That's just like pulling the fire alarm and no one's going to come. We know what a state of emergency does. It does nothing. It doesn't build homes. It doesn't build affordability. Doesn't raise wages. And very highly unlikely that the province is going to do that, right? So I talked about this the other day. Ontario alone needs 807,000 deeply affordable homes at a cost of about 62 billion over 10 years. Scale that across Canada, and the need is over 2.1 million homes at a cost of 163 billion. So let's break down the math, the human impact, and why deeply affordable housing pegged to income is the only real solution to Canada's homeless crisis. The Ontario as the benchmark. So need 108 100 807,000 deeply affordable units, a cost of 62 billion over 10 years. Per unit cost 76,800. The gap, current provincial federal funding, covers only a fraction of this. Ontario's math is the anchor. If one province needs nearly 1 million units, the national scale is staggering. Supportive versus non-supporting housing. Supportive housing, 75,000 units, 11 billion over 10 years. Includes wraparound services, mental health and addiction, disability supports, about 9% of total need. Non-supportive, deeply affordable housing, 732,000 units, rents pegged to 30% of the wages. Families, seniors, workers who don't need intensive supports, they just need affordability. The cost, 56 billion over 10 years, about 91% of the total need. Most of Ontario's housing crisis is not about services, it's about affordability math. Population share, Ontario, about 38% of Canada's population. We have 41 million people in Canada. Ontario makes up 38%. 807,000 divided by 0.38 equals 2.12 million units needed nationwide at a cost 2.2 1.12 million times 76,800 is 163 billion over 10 years. And that'll be needing the federal and provincial funding. Annual investment is 16 billion a year. Canada needs a program on the scale of national infrastructure, not piecemeal announcements. The current pipeline versus the need, federal Build Canada homes, 26,000 units over 5 years. Affordable Housing Fund, modest contributions, mostly in the preserving the gap is 26,000 versus 2.1 million, less than 2% of the need. Current plans are symbolic compared to the scale required. The encampments, thousands living outside in tents across Canadian cities. They're estimating about 235,000 Canadians are homeless across the country. That number is probably higher because we are not counting the hidden homeless. We could be up over 300,000 across Canada. They estimated about 35,000 Canadians sleep rough on any given night. That could be as high as probably 40,000 people sleeping rough on any given night. The 60 tiny huts that they want to put on industrial land here in this city, supposed to be opening January. We'll see if that even happens or how many are they going to get done. And that's still, we have 613 beds, I think, in the city. The other night, they opened up the Boyle Community Center, added 30 beds. 2,000 people homeless in the city. That was still a little over 1,200 people who were sleeping rough. Temperatures plummeted to minus 15 Celsius the other night. So the human impact, encampments, thousands living outside in tents across Canada cities, shelters at capacity nationwide with warming centers insufficient. Families, 250,000 households on Ontario's waitlist. Here in the city of London, that wait time is approximately 10 years. The risks that these individuals are facing, exposure in winter, heat in summer, sanitation failures, violence, and trauma. Encampments are not housing, they are survival strategies with system fails. Deep affordability, rent pegged to income of 30% of the household income. Supportive housing for those with complex needs, but only 9% of the total. Indigenous housing, dedicated streams led by Indigenous partners. Wraparound supports, mental health, addiction, employment services. To preserve, acquire at-risk buildings, to stop net losses. Public land, use federal and professional sites for large-scale builds. So this industrial land that they're using for these tiny huts, I don't see industrial going up in that area. The city needs to expand out. If we have this land available, we need to rezone it to residential, is what we need to be doing. The forensic truth is this: Ontario needs 807,000 homes. Canada needs 2.1 million homes. Of Ontario's needs, only 75,000 require supportive services. The other 732,000 are families who simply need rent capped at 30% of the wages. And the cost of is 163 billion over 10 years, about 16 billion a year nationwide. Current federal plans deliver 26,000 units, less than 2% of what's required. And without the deeply affordable housing pegged to income, encampments will grow, more people will become homeless, shelters will overflow, and families will remain outside. The survival math doesn't change with headlines, it changes with policy, and this is the reckoning Canada faces. Now, things are really not different in other places of the world. Now, I was looking at, okay, where's this money going? How much money does Ontario spend on homeless annually? So here's the forensic breakdown of where Ontario's 1.4 to 1.5 billion annually homeless spending actually goes, and why so much of it is never reaches the scale of deeply affordable housing. Homeless prevention program, largest provincial stream, 700 million annually. Flows to municipalities to fund shelters, outreach, rent supplements, and traditional housing. Covers emergency responses rather than long-term housing stock. Community homeless prevention, consolidated into the HPP, but historically funded shelter beds, supportive housing, and case management. Municipalities used to keep shelters open and cover overflow costs. The supportive housing and mental health services is 1.7 billion announced for supportive housing and mental health integration funds, operating costs for group homes, supportive units, and wraparound services, caseworkers, addiction supports. The small share, 75.7 million in recent announcements, goes to modular builds, traditional housing, and indigenous housing projects, far below the building needs for permanent, deeply affordable units. Yes, we need all these units. Emergency and warming center, seasonal funding for overflow beds and warming centers in winter, often activated only in extreme cold at minus 15 Celsius, leaving gaps in moderate cold. The majority of the funds is short term. The smaller share supportive housing operations, that's staff and the services, tiny fraction newly deeply affordable housing. Now, I was just reading recently in the news and to come up to this here keeps bringing me back to now. Ireland is scaling back affordable housing. Now, what's happening in Ireland in the research by the Northern Ireland Federation of Housing Association shows that plans for 2,092 new social homes over the next 2 years could fall to just 1,100 because of reduced government funding. Not surprising. The Department for Communities previously covered about 50% of the cost of social housing. Under new arrangements, this drops to 46%, and in some high need areas like Belfast, only 42%. Housing associations would need to rely more on commercial loans, but higher borrowing costs make many projects financially unviable. Belfast planned 1,026 homes, now only 373 likely to be built. Lisburn planned 291 homes, now at risk of zero being built. Causeway Coast and the Glens will see a slight increase with 50 additional homes, a total of 301. Other areas, Fermanagh and the Mid-East Atrium will see no change. But the Northern Ireland program government had committed to starting 5,850 new social homes by 2027. But current building rates mean this target will likely be missed. With 50,000 households on waiting list, cutting hundreds of homes deepens the crisis. The NIFHA estimates an additional 23 million euros in funding is needed to close the gap and keep projects viable. Now, I wanted to do the cost and what our Canadian dollar and the euro of what that means, right? So Northern Ireland's average rent is about 974 euros a month. That's about $1,670 a month here. To 1892 a month. The median wage in Northern Ireland a year is about 37,100 euros, compared to Ontario's is like 69,100 a year. So in Northern Ireland in 2025, the average rent was 974 euros a month. That's like 1,670 Canadian. Belfast average is 1,130 euros a month. That's like 1,940 Canadian. Outside of Belfast, 850 euros a month. That's like 1,460 Canadian. So rent absorbs 36 to 42% of median income, higher for low income households. In Ontario, as of December 2025, Average rent is $18.92 a month for a 1 bedroom. 2 bedrooms are about $22.87 a month. Uh, Toronto's average is about 2,521 a month. 2 bedrooms are nearly 3,000. Even smaller cities like Sudbury, Windsor averages about anywhere from $1,500 to $1,600 a month. So the median annual earnings in euros is 37,100, equals about 63,500 Canadian. The median weekly earnings is about 713 euros. Minimum wage is $12.21 euros an hour for 21 plus. $10 an hour euros for ages 18 and 20. And Ontario's average in 2025 is average annual salary is 69,141, and the average weekly earnings is about 1330. Minimum wage is at 1760 an hour. Northern Ireland's wages are lower than Ontario's, but rents are also slightly lower. Still, rent burdens are high, and over 40% of income in Belfast. Ontario wages are higher, but rents in Toronto and the Greater Toronto area consume 40 to 45% of income, leaving households equally strained. Both regions show the same systemic math. Housing costs outpace wages, forcing households into poverty. I was interested to see, what the wait list here, you know, social housing wait list province wide is like 250,000. So Ontario's housing costs are higher, but Northern Ireland's wages are lower. The result is the same. The rent burdens exceed affordability thresholds, pushing families into crisis. Social benefits that you get. Northern Ireland, it's universal credit, basic living, plus housing supports. Housing benefit, rent support, job seekers allowance, employment and supportive allowance. We get employment insurance if we lose our job here in Ontario. Job seekers allowance, well, it's like our employment insurance. So disability living allowance, we have the disability living allowance and personal independence payments. State pension and pension credit, we have CPP, old age security. So here in Ontario, it's the Ontario Disability Support Program. Ontario Works, like welfare, basic income support. Canada's pension plan and old age security, child benefits, GST, HST credits. The benefits provide a floor, but not enough to cover rent. In both regions, even with housing supports, families remain housing burdened. Encampments and the human impact. So Ontario, thousands left outside nightly. London, roughly about 1,300. Toronto, 5,500. In Northern Ireland, rising homelessness with encampments and temporary shelters growing on social housing projects while they're being scrapped. Ontario, the spending versus the need here in Ontario. Ontario, 75.5 million to 1.7 billion announced, but math demands tens of billions and 805,000 deeply affordable units just here in Ontario. Northern Ireland, hundreds of planned social homes scrapped due to funding cuts. 23 million euros needed to keep projects viable. Governments announce millions, but the math demands billions. Whether it's in Belfast or the city of Toronto, the math is the same. Wages don't match the rents, benefits don't bridge the gap. Families are spending 40% of more on their income just to keep a roof overhead. Encampments grow, shelters overflow, and social housing is cut back. The solution is structural. Build deeply affordable housing pegged to income. Without it, declaring an emergency and announcements are just words. Survival math doesn't change with headlines, it changes with policy, and this is the reckoning we face on both sides of the Atlantic. Canada needs a coordinated scale plan that delivers non-market homes pegged to income, preserve existing affordable stock, and funds that keep people stably housed. And recent federal moves are a start, but current funding and pace are modest relative to need. Canada needs a multi-year program that delivers hundreds of thousands of deeply affordable non-market homes with a clear annual budget target and regional allocations. Current federal plans through Build Canada Homes are expected to add roughly 26,000 units over 5 years, a modest contribution relative to the national shortage. Housing first, and housing obviously is the only thing that's going to end homeless and keep people housed. And affordability. Thank you for listening. This is the North Affair podcast, Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug, from Ontario, Canada. Thank you and take care.